The Satanic Verses. Published on September 26, 1988, Salman Rushdie's fourth novel sparked one of modern literature's most dangerous controversies. The British Indian author's work of magical realism contains dream sequences and characters whose names reference figures from early Islamic history, including depictions some Muslims found blasphemous regarding the Prophet Muhammad. India banned the book in October 1988, followed by Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bangladesh, Sudan, and South Africa. On February 14, 1989, Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa calling for Rushdie's death, offering a bounty initially reported at around $3 million. Rushdie immediately entered hiding under British police protection, living in safe houses for approximately 9 years under the pseudonym Joseph Anton, combining the first names of authors Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov. The controversy turned deadly beyond the author himself. Japanese translator Hitoshi Igarashi was stabbed to death in 1991. Italian translator Ettore Capriolo was seriously wounded, and Norwegian publisher William Nygaard survived a shooting. Bookstores were firebombed in the UK and USA. Rushdie eventually emerged from hiding in the late 1990s, but required security protection for decades. On August 12, 2022, he was stabbed multiple times on stage in Chautauqua, New York, losing sight in one eye and use of one hand, proving the fatwa's enduring threat 33 years later. Dr. Zhivago. Boris Pasternak completed his epic love story set during the Russian Revolution in 1956, but Soviet publishers immediately rejected the manuscript. The novel's portrayal of the Bolshevik Revolution as a complex tragedy rather than glorious triumph, along with its emphasis on individual human experience over collective ideology, made it unacceptable to authorities. Pasternak smuggled the manuscript to Italian publisher Feltrinelli, which released it in November 1957. When the Swedish Academy awarded Pasternak the Nobel Prize in Literature on October 23, 1958, Soviet authorities forced him to send a telegram declining it just 6 days later. The Union of Soviet Writers expelled him. State-controlled newspapers published vicious attacks calling him a traitor, and neighbors were organized to denounce him publicly. While Pasternak never fled Moscow or entered formal hiding, he lived under constant surveillance and house arrest conditions at his dacha in Peredelkino. The stress and persecution likely contributed to his fatal heart attack on June 1, 1960, at age 70. His funeral became an act of defiance, with thousands attending despite official disapproval. The CIA later confirmed it had secretly distributed Russian-language copies of the novel as part of Cold War cultural operations. Dr. Zhivago wasn't published legally in the Soviet Union until 1988 during Glasnost, nearly 3 decades after Pasternak's death. The Gulag Archipelago. After surviving 8 years in Soviet labor camps himself, Alexander Solzhenitsyn spent years secretly gathering testimonies from 227 fellow prisoners to document the vast system of political repression. His earlier novel One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich had been published in 1962 during Khrushchev's brief thaw, but the Gulag Archipelago went far beyond, exposing the full scale of Stalin's camps, where an estimated 15 to 18 million people were imprisoned. Solzhenitsyn completed the manuscript in 1968, but kept it hidden, knowing publication meant certain arrest. When the KGB discovered and confiscated one copy in 1973, he authorized its release in Paris that December. On February 12, 1974, Soviet authorities arrested Solzhenitsyn at his home. The next day, he was stripped of Soviet citizenship and forcibly deported to West Germany, then settled in Vermont. He lived in exile for 20 years, unable to return until the Soviet Union's collapse. The book's impact was seismic. Typed copies circulated secretly throughout the USSR in samizdat form, with estimates suggesting millions read it illegally. Western readers finally grasped the true scope of Soviet atrocities. Solzhenitsyn had already won the Nobel Prize in 1970, but couldn't attend the ceremony, fearing he wouldn't be allowed back into the country to continue his work exposing the camps. Lolita. Vladimir Nabokov's controversial masterpiece was rejected by 4 American publishers before Olympia Press in Paris released it in September 1955. The novel's first-person narrator, Humbert Humbert, is a literature professor obsessed with 12-year-old Dolores Hayes, whom he calls Lolita. Despite its disturbing subject matter, the book is written in highly literary, complex prose and is considered a significant work of 20th century fiction. British novelist Graham Greene called it one of the best books of 1955, triggering fierce debate in Britain. French authorities banned it from 1956 to 1959, and British customs officials seized copies at the border. New Zealand, South Africa, and Argentina also prohibited the book. After Putnam finally published it in America in August 1958, it became an immediate bestseller, selling 100,000 copies in the first 3 weeks. Nabokov never went into hiding, though he faced intense moral criticism and public condemnation. The book sparked parliamentary debates in Britain about literary merit versus obscenity. While not pornographic, its subject remains deeply uncomfortable, presenting a pedophile's perspective through unreliable narration that forces readers to confront difficult questions about art, morality, and criminal psychology. Film adaptations in 1962 and 1997 reignited controversy. The novel remains banned in some countries today, but is widely taught in universities as a complex examination of obsession, manipulation, and the nature of evil. The Jewel of Medina. American author Sherry Jones spent years researching a historical novel about Aisha, who, according to Islamic tradition, became the Prophet Muhammad's wife. Random House contracted to publish the book in 2007, but in August 2008, after University of Texas professor Denise Spellberg warned the publisher about potential violent reactions, Random House abruptly canceled publication, citing security concerns. The decision came before any actual threats materialized, representing preventative self-censorship influenced by the precedent of Rushdie's fatwa. Beaufort Books, a smaller publisher, acquired the rights and released The Jewel of Medina in October 2008. Jones received death threats following publication, and on September 27, 2008, 3 men firebombed the home of Martin Rinya, publisher of the book's UK edition in London, though no one was injured. The novel was banned in Indonesia, Pakistan, and several other Muslim-majority countries. Jones took security precautions and maintained a lower profile, but never entered formal witness protection or hiding like Rushdie. Critics argued the book was a sympathetic portrayal of Aisha, written as accessible historical romance rather than deliberate provocation. The controversy highlighted how publishers had become cautious about any content related to Islam's founding figures, with Random House's cancellation demonstrating how the threat of violence could suppress books before publication, raising questions about whether self-censorship by fearful publishers represented a more insidious form of censorship than government bans. The Anarchist Cookbook. Written by 19-year-old William Powell in 1971 during the height of anti-Vietnam War sentiment, this book contains instructions for making explosives, drugs, and weapons, presented with anti-establishment ideology. Lyle Stewart Incorporated published it that year, and it sold over 2 million copies, becoming infamous far beyond Powell's original intentions. The book mixes genuine information with dangerous inaccuracies that have reportedly caused injuries to people attempting its recipes. While not formally banned in the United States due to First Amendment protections, it has been banned or restricted in Australia and the UK, where it can only be sold to adults over 18. Powell later deeply regretted writing the book, converting to Christianity, becoming a teacher, and spending decades trying to have it removed from publication. However, he had signed away copyright control, and the publisher refused to stop printing it because it remained profitable. Powell's attempts to suppress his own youthful work failed completely. The book has been linked to various crimes, including being found in the possession of Timothy McVeigh, though direct connections between the book and specific terrorist acts are often overstated. Powell never went into hiding, but lived with the burden of his creation until his death in 2024. The case raises troubling questions about author rights, publisher responsibility, and the permanence of published work. In the internet age, the information has become widely available online, making the physical book's continued publication largely symbolic of outdated attempts at information control. American Psycho. Bret Easton Ellis's third novel about Wall Street executive and serial killer Patrick Bateman was originally contracted by Simon & Schuster, but the publisher canceled it in November 1990 after advance excerpts leaked and sparked outrage over its extremely graphic depictions of torture, murder, and sexual violence. Vintage Books, an imprint of Knopf, published it in March 1991, despite protests from feminist organizations, including the National Organization for Women, whose spokesperson described it as literature of serial murder. The book contains scenes of extreme brutality presented in first-person narration by an unreliable narrator, making it unclear whether the violence is real or fantasy within the story's world. Ellis received death threats and increased personal security, but never entered formal hiding. Multiple bookstores refused to stock the book, and it was temporarily banned in Australia, New Zealand, and Germany. Canadian customs detained shipments at the border. The novel is also a dark satire of 1980s yuppie culture, consumerism, and materialism, with lengthy descriptions of designer brands and status symbols interspersed with horrific violence. Critics remain divided on whether the extreme content serves literary purpose or crosses into gratuitousness. The book has since become a cult classic and influenced the transgressive fiction genre. A film adaptation starring Christian Bale was released in 2000, also generating controversy. Ellis's career survived and flourished, with the book now often taught in university courses examining satire, unreliable narration, and the boundaries of artistic expression. The Turner Diaries. Published in 1978 under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald, this novel was actually written by William Luther Pierce, leader of the white supremacist organization National Alliance. The book presents a first-person fictional account of a violent white supremacist revolution against the United States government, including detailed descriptions of terrorist tactics such as truck bombing federal buildings. It is extremely racist and anti-Semitic, depicting genocide as heroic. The book sold approximately 500,000 copies, primarily through underground networks and white supremacist organizations. While not banned in the United States due to First Amendment protections, it has been prohibited in Canada, Germany, and other countries with stricter hate speech laws. The book's influence turned deadly when it inspired real terrorist acts. Timothy McVeigh, who killed 168 people in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, was found with pages from the Turner Diaries in his possession, and his attack closely resembled a truck bombing described in the novel. The white supremacist group, The Order, active in the 1980s, also used it as a blueprint. Pierce never went into hiding and operated openly through front organizations until his death in 2002, though the FBI monitored National Alliance activities extensively. The book remains in circulation within extremist movements and is studied by law enforcement to understand domestic terrorism ideology. It represents a case where a banned book's dangerous influence is clearly documented rather than speculative, raising difficult questions about the balance between free speech and content that demonstrably inspires mass violence. Spycatcher. Former MI5 officer Peter Wright wrote this memoir, exposing British intelligence operations without government authorization after retiring in 1976 and moving to Australia. Co-written with journalist Paul Greengrass, the book alleged Soviet moles had penetrated MI5 at the highest levels, claimed that former director Roger Hollis was a Soviet spy, described illegal surveillance methods, and controversially suggested MI5 had plotted against Prime Minister Harold Wilson. The British government attempted to ban publication under the Official Secrets Act, initiating legal proceedings in 1986 that continued through 1988. Heinemann Australia published the book in July 1987, despite UK government opposition. British newspapers were prohibited from quoting it, but Viking Penguin released an American edition in September 1987, making the UK ban increasingly futile. The book became an international bestseller precisely because of the attempted suppression. Wright remained in Australia throughout the controversy, effectively hiding from British jurisdiction where he could have faced prosecution. He died there in 1995, never returning to the UK. The British government reportedly spent over £2 million trying to prevent publication, ultimately failing when the ban was lifted in October 1988, after the book was already widely available internationally. The case demonstrated the impossibility of containing information in the global age and raised questions about whistleblowing versus protecting national security secrets. Many of Wright's specific claims, particularly the alleged plot against Wilson, remain disputed and unproven, though the book did reveal genuine MI5 operations and embarrassed the British intelligence establishment considerably. My Friend Dahmer, cartoonist Durf Backdurf, published this graphic novel memoir in March 2012 about his high school friendship with Jeffrey Dahmer, before Dahmer became one of America's most notorious serial killers. Backdurf attended Revere High School in Richfield, Ohio, with Dahmer from 1972 to 1978, providing a unique first-hand perspective on the future murderer's teenage years. The black-and-white illustrated book depicts warning signs that were missed. Dahmer's increasingly disturbing behavior, his alcoholism, and his troubled home life, all presented through the lens of Backdurf's adolescent experience. While published by Abrams Comic Arts without controversy initially, the book later faced challenges in multiple American school libraries starting around 2017. Parents and administrators cited concerns about graphic images, disturbing content, and the appropriateness of material about serial killers for teenage readers. The American Library Association tracks these challenges as part of its annual list of most frequently challenged books. Unlike government-imposed bans, these were local decisions by school boards responding to parent complaints, representing a different form of censorship. Backdurf never went into hiding and has defended the book's educational value in helping recognize warning signs of dangerous behavior. A film adaptation was released in 2017. The book raises important questions about true crime ethics, particularly the balance between educational examination of how killers develop versus potentially exploitative or disturbing content. It also highlights the distinction between government censorship and community-driven challenges to books in educational settings. The Peaceful Pill Handbook. Australian physician Philip Nitschke, who founded the Right to Die organization, Exit International, in 1997, first published this practical euthanasia guide in 2006 with co-author Fiona Stewart. The book provides detailed information about end-of-life options, including specific methods, drug dosages, and supplier information intended primarily for elderly or terminally ill people seeking control over their deaths. Sales are restricted to people over 50 or those with serious illness. Australia banned the book from sale in 2006, followed by New Zealand and other countries, though digital versions proved harder to restrict and remain available online. Australian authorities raided Nitschke's office multiple times, and he lost his medical license in 2014 after decades of advocacy work. Rather than hiding, Nitschke relocated to the Netherlands in 2015 to continue his work outside Australian jurisdiction. The book is updated annually with new information as laws and methods change. Amazon banned sales in 2011, but reinstated the book in 2019 with age restrictions after controversy about censorship. The handbook sits at the center of contentious debates about assisted dying, patient autonomy, information access, and suicide prevention. Opponents argue it provides dangerous information that could be misused, while supporters maintain that terminally ill people have the right to information about peaceful death options. The book's censorship varies dramatically by country, reflecting different cultural and legal approaches to euthanasia. Digital technology has made complete suppression nearly impossible, demonstrating again how modern information distribution challenges traditional censorship methods, regardless of the content's controversial nature. The hoax of the 20th century. Northwestern University engineering professor Arthur Butts published this Holocaust denial book in 1976 through Historical Review Press in the UK, claiming the systematic murder of 6 million Jews never occurred and that gas chambers were fabricated. Butts holds a PhD in electrical engineering, not history, and his work has been thoroughly debunked by historians and condemned as anti-Semitic propaganda disguised as scholarship. The book selectively uses evidence, misrepresents historical documents, and ignores overwhelming documentation of Nazi genocide, including survivor testimonies, Nazi records, physical evidence from camps, and extensive photographic documentation. It has been banned in Germany, Austria, France, Poland, Israel, and other countries with laws against Holocaust denial. In the United States, it remains legal under First Amendment protections, though it has been universally condemned by historians and educational institutions. Northwestern University has repeatedly and emphatically denounced the book while being unable to fire Butts due to tenure protections and academic freedom principles. The book became a foundational text for the Holocaust denial movement and continues circulating in extremist networks. Butts never went into hiding, remaining employed at Northwestern until retirement, facing protests and condemnation, but not legal prosecution in America. The case illustrates tensions between free speech, academic freedom, and historical truth. It also demonstrates how banned books are not always unjustly censored. Some contain demonstrably false, hateful content designed to rehabilitate Nazi ideology and promote anti-Semitism. The Holocaust is among the most documented events in human history, with irrefutable evidence from multiple independent sources across many countries. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.